Okay, welcome everyone. It's Tim Richter from the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness and Vote Housing. Just wanted to welcome you to our final strategy session of the 2021 federal election campaign and Vote Housing in this campaign. We are into the home stretch, our 7-day sprint to Election Day. And this is always the most exciting part of election campaigns. And I am thrilled that you could join us. So Zane, if you want to flip ahead to the next slide. So I'm joined here by friend and colleague Zane Velji, who will walk you through a good part of this presentation. But what we wanted to do today was give you a bit of an update on the campaign and what our strategy is for the next 7 days in the sprint to Election Day. We're going to share some tactics and how you can help, and we're also going to make sure that there's some time to hear from you. So take a minute to familiarize yourself with the controls. I'm sure everybody knows how to operate in Zoom these days. But a couple of things, if you want to flip ahead quickly, Zane. So everyone is muted. We've got quite a few folks on the line. But we're going to give everyone an opportunity to ask that feel free to use the chat to offer suggestions or comments, ideas. Let us know who you are and where you're from. Please use the Q&A tab you see down on the bottom of your control panel to ask questions. For those of you who are tuning in, who speak French, we have simultaneous interpretation available, and that's and the little globe button on the bottom right of the control panel. So if you want to flip ahead. So we're going to talk a bit about what we've accomplished together. But first, I want to sort of zoom out and think about this campaign in the perspective. So Zane, if you want to flip ahead one more slide. So I've said a lot over and over, those of you who heard me, about how homelessness and housing need in Canada is a product of policy. That began in the 80s, in the sort of mid 80s, and accelerated in the 90s. And we talk about homelessness and housing need being created by policy, but Vote Housing actually stands on the shoulders of decades of advocacy in the homelessness and housing world. This is a front page copy or picture in the front page of the Toronto Star from 1998, when the Toronto Disaster Relief Committee got together and declared homelessness a national disaster. Not long after this press conference and the media following that, they were joined by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and that soon after became was the genesis of National Housing Day that happens every November. And over the course of 14 or 15 years, the Toronto Disaster Relief Committee had a lot of successes in lobbying for changes to help address this growing crisis of homelessness that they were seeing in Toronto and across the country. And the point of this is to say homelessness, yes, was created by policy, but we as a community and as a sector have power to address this policy. And today we actually find ourselves in the best position that we've been in 40 years or 35 years since the rise of modern mass homelessness. The national housing strategy that we have in place today and the federal leadership on housing is the direct result of this declaration, of the work of the Toronto Disaster Relief Committee and others around the country lobbying for change. So we have now what we didn't have before. We have billions of dollars invested in housing. We have a return of federal leadership on housing. We have, in my world of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, we know we've got 10 communities reducing chronic homelessness. We have one that has ended veteran homelessness, one that's ended chronic homelessness. And we are in now the last 7 days of an election campaign where every single party has put forward a platform on housing, where we have where housing is a issue, a leading issue, if not the biggest issue of the campaign. So zooming out, we are actually in a really great position and really powerful position. And this is something that I wanted to emphasize before we think about the final days of this campaign and how important it is for us to really put our foot on the gas and drive hard to make sure all parties are hearing from us that ending homelessness and addressing housing need in Canada are essential, and that they're being demanded by thousands upon thousands of Canadians. You want to flip ahead, Zane? The Vote Housing campaign really builds on that long history of advocacy in the sector. Our goal, our ambition starting Vote Housing, it was to create the largest nonpartisan housing advocacy campaign in Canadian history, mobilizing thousands of Canadians to pledge to vote housing in this federal election. And the success of this campaign so far, again, there's no silver bullets, there's no instant success. You have to continuously push and apply pressure on government. But we're in a position now where, coming out of this election, no matter who ends up at the top of the heap, housing's at the top of the agenda, ending homelessness is at the top of the agenda, and most, if not all, parties are signed on. Flip ahead. One more slide is some photos of our work, and just to give you a sense of, before I hand it over to Zane, just some of what's happened in the first, 29 days, 28 days? I can't do the math. Lots of days. And not a lot of time in a grand scheme of an election campaign, but we've had over 20,000 people have pledged to vote housing, over 200 endorsing organizations, a couple hundred volunteers. We've delivered 1,000 supporter kits. Over 50,000 letters have been sent to candidates. Candidates in every single riding in the country have received letters from all candidates. In every single riding have received letters from all of you, which is really something else. We have 300,000+ video views and over 1 million people reached on social media. So a huge presence in this campaign, and there's even more happening as we speak. And I think, as well, I wanted to just talk about how this has been reflected. And we saw this especially during the beginning phase, the first 2 weeks of the election campaign, but housing was the issue that everybody's talking about. But we've seen that consistently through the campaign, and hearing, either directly or through others from candidates, this is an issue they continue to hear on the doors in communities. We see it reflected in the polling, especially on affordability. All parties have housing platforms of varying scope and detail, but that really signals retrenched and entrenched federal leadership on housing, and that has been a critical missing ingredient. And I mean, I could be wrong, and I often am, but chances are good we're not going to end up with a majority government out of this. Even if we did, we would be well positioned in that environment. But with a minority, we may be in the same position we were earlier, where there is a majority of MPs in the House of Commons from across parties who are committed to ending homelessness and making significant investments in affordable housing to address Canada's housing crisis. So several parties have committed to ending chronic homelessness, and all parties have committed to an Indigenous housing strategy. So we are in really good shape. We're really well positioned for this last week, and we are really well positioned for the first days, weeks, and months of the next government, thanks in large measure to all of you. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Zane, who's going to walk through some of the work we're going to do and some of the things we'd like your help with in the last week of the campaign.
Thank you, Tim. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. I know everyone's time is extremely tight, and so really value everyone being here, not just today, but for the actions that you have done, for the commitment that you have had on this campaign. Before I jump into the campaign, let me kind of talk about some of our successes, because I think it's important. And our successes in the course of this campaign, when we've really ramped it up, are in a couple of areas. They're around outputs, things that we've kind of put out there, activity, and then conversation is what I'd say. And I think we've done fairly well on all three of those metrics. As it relates to outputs, I mean, we've produced, as Tim has said, several videos generating several 100,000 views. You as supporters have sent more than 50,000 letters to candidates, including federal leaders, ensuring that this issue, if they get their eye off the ball one day, you've been there to ensure that you get their eyes back on it the next day by flooding their inboxes, by ensuring you're a presence online on social media. We've also had, significant activity. One of the biggest activities we've had as a campaign is we held a national housing debate. The week of the debates, there was not just the two debates, there was a third one. It was a national housing debate, all parties present. We had several thousand people kind of join that conversation to hear from their respective parties where each of these federal parties wanted to go around housing and homelessness. And to Tim's point, every party has put forward a platform. And if I can wager to say, that's the first time, Tim, that I think we have seen this in a modern sort of electoral space. I know that the definition of who housing is for is varied amongst the parties, but the fact is that this is a core focal point in the election to even constitute and necessitate this other sort of debate is fascinating. And what I will say, is that from the perspective of an advocacy campaign like ours, this is a pretty big accomplishment, I would say. And it's thanks to you. This is not Tim and I taking a victory lap. Don't get me wrong here. This is really us trying to download because without our supporters, the 20,000 plus that have, pledged, the hundreds of thousands that belong to the organizations that have endorsed, none of this is possible. But, to get housing on the agenda, to be in the media each and every week, you'll see a snapshot of some media roundup activity. This is just 1 week. Every week has been like this, where we've been on the CBC or local news. We've seen signs popping up in and around community, places we didn't even know. Tim and I got a text last week saying someone was just walking down in rural Nova Scotia and just saw a vote housing sign, and we're trying to figure out who helped us put that there. We have no idea. But, the campaign, thanks to your outreach, your efforts, your involvement, frankly, your enthusiasm and ambition, if I can put it that way, has been able to garner this success. And so it's not just, the centralized stuff that we've been doing, the videos and the debates and the platform highlights of each of the parties, but it's been the energy, it's been the enthusiasm, it's been the groundwork and the sharing of this campaign amongst your networks that's kept it, that's volleyed it each and every week in this campaign and allowed it to stay active and alive. And that really is a bit of a precursor to what this final week looks like, which I'll get into in a second here. And finally, this is just hot off the press. We had a tremendous offer by our friends at Outdoor Media, one of the largest, if not the largest, outdoor media billboard advertising company in the entire country. We are in, I'd say, several cities, Tim, fair to say. I'd say close to a dozen, if I'm not mistaken, just looking through that list, about 10 cities across the country in both languages, with digital billboards across the country, thanks to that amazing partnership. So as we build with the digital campaign, as you help with both bringing friends, family, pledging, putting pressure on candidates, as folks help us out in the field game, whether it be organized in certain areas or like that random lawn sign in Nova Scotia, we're still trying to figure out, being put out there in various communities. What we're building is a comprehensive campaign that crescendos, that is still going and continuing to have movement and growth and brand presence. And these signs just help us do that in that final week, in that final stretch. So let me talk about the next 7 days. And, the last 7 days in a campaign, any political campaign, because frankly, I can say that, we are a political campaign. It's a title that I've been refusing to give to us in many ways, because of the scary word that is political. But let me tell you something, for anyone that's engaged in this campaign thus far, a round of applause, because while we are absolutely nonpartisan and are committed to being nonpartisan, we are political. We are wading into the politics of a general election, the cadence of what we have tried to do in this campaign by encouraging field, by encouraging advertising of a small quantity, but a bit by encouraging the digital advocacy, is the cadence of a political campaign. And your involvement in that has been political. And you know, one of the things Tim and I often talk about, not to take too much of a detour, Tim, is this concept that, you know, what we are building here is a movement that lasts beyond September 20th, because we've now got literally thousands of people ready to engage, but thousands of people that, even if you haven't realized it by this point, you've engaged in politics. It doesn't have to be this big, scary thing. For us, it's really a power building exercise that once you dip your toe into it, like many thousand have this election, our hope is that you stay with us as we move forward and as we continue to use politics to overturn and push for policy that we know is necessary in this country to finally end homelessness and address this housing precarity in Canada. So, you know, for when I make that comparison for any campaign in politics and I kind of run by it, I just want you to fully acknowledge and congratulate yourself that you have, you know, been involved in a political but nonpartisan, above board, you know, totally within the things that we're trying to balance your campaign. That is really all about trying to build power and momentum. And the only way we do that successfully is by finishing strong. You know, 4 good weeks is excellent. It's like playing 3 great quarters of basketball or 2.5 awesome periods of hockey, but it doesn't matter if you can't land the plane, finish the deal, seal the deal, so to speak. One thing we don't have, right, which the political parties do in the last 7-day stretch as they're stressed out in various ridings, is that, you know, for us, we're not looking at the vote count at the end of the day and saying, did we win or lose? But we do have metrics of win or lose. Let me be clear, right? There are things that matter to us that ensure whether our campaign in the final stretch is successful. So our top line strategy heading into these final 7 days is crystal clear and very simple. And let me present it to you. It's that in the final days, we are all campaigners. And you might be asking yourself, okay, Zane, what do you mean by that? What I simply mean is that you might have come into this campaign as someone who is part of an organization, one of our endorsing organizations. You might have come into this campaign as someone who pledged online and signed up to join. You might have come into this campaign because a friend or family member told you to. We know there's several dozen of those. You might have seen a Facebook post and said, you know what, this is attractive to me, I want to jump in, right? Wherever you've come from or whatever sort of access point got you into this campaign, what I'll tell you is for this week, the next 7 days, I want you to think of yourself as a campaigner. I want you to think of yourself as someone who's not just supporting this initiative, but someone who's going to campaign for this initiative. And when I tell you that, let me actually lower the bar quite significantly of what campaigning means, right? Campaigning isn't this fancy sort of term of, you know, pre-existing skills or having a certain sort of like guidebook and being able to know what to say, where to say it. No. What campaigning simply is reaching out to those that you know best, your friends, your family, your network, and being honest with them about your why you are here and why you're supporting this campaign. If you can do that over the next 7 days, and we're going to help you more over the 7 days than we have thus far in the campaign by giving you an activity each and every day to do, which I'll talk to you about in a second. But that's what if we all become campaigners over the next 7 days, we have tremendous potential to do a couple of things. Number one, ensure that the peak of our momentum wasn't last week or wasn't today, but is tomorrow and is the day after and is the day after that, which is hugely important. I'll tell you why in a second. And number two, we ensure that, you know, you have an opportunity in this rare sort of time period that we have to actually fully engage on this campaign. What I will say, and I'll say this unconditionally, it is not too late to engage. This campaign, its peak, and I don't even speak of us, I mean this election campaign that we are seeing, because it was a summer campaign, because it was a COVID campaign, because we had a long weekend and Labor Day in between, most folks in this country have started to pay attention last week, if not this week, to the campaign, if they do at all. This is a rare opportunity for us. In most campaigns, I'd say 7 days, that's cutting it tight. In this campaign, it's the perfect window. It is not too late to engage, to reach out to friends, to reach out to family, to turn yourself into a campaigner for this cause, to put out material, to put out content. I'll tell you exactly what you can do right away. It is not too late to embrace that mindset and to do it in this small but extremely important and effective and critical time block, which is the next 7 days, the final 7 days of this campaign. So I really want to leave you with that message that this is not too late to jump in and to engage. Most campaigns, political campaigns at this moment, the last 7 days, have something called GOTV or GOTV. And it's an acronym for Get Out the Vote, right? So what you will see, and I'm sure you're seeing it already, regardless of where you are in this country, every political party, you're probably seeing ads, you're probably on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram seeing social media posts about political parties telling you to go vote, get out there and vote. Here's how you vote. Go access the, elections.ca, make sure you've got everything you need to vote. Every political campaign kind of turns its head around this point in the campaign, 10 to 7 days before, and says, okay, we've done all this sort of work. Now we're going to just turn that machine off, that communications machine, and we're going to focus on getting people to the polls, get them out to vote. Here's where we stand. We have a unique moment and a unique advantage because our campaign is not an electoral partisan campaign where we need to drive people to the polls and focus singularly on voting. We actually have an option to build a few more tracks at the same time. Yes, absolutely, voting is important. Frankly, it's in our name. Vote housing, right? So 100% it's important. But the next 7 days give us a unique advantage to do a couple of other things. So rather than GOTV, we're focusing on GOTVV. Get out the vote, get out your voice, and let's turn up the volume, the 3 Vs. Let me explain to you what each of these are, because this is really important as in terms of our strategy, the GOTVV strategy. When we get up the volume, we're actually turning up the volume on our campaign. Most political campaigns at this moment of time would say, people already know what we're about. We have to just convert simply to getting them out to vote. Not the case with us, because what we know is that this is a platform, this is a movement that will need to last beyond that election day. We need our crescendo to happen on election day and frankly, even beyond in some cases, so that if and when whoever forms government, I shouldn't say if, someone will form government. When they do, we've got this platform ready to ensure that we can engage with them thereon after. That vote housing doesn't stop at the vote. It increases the volume during the vote, leading up to the vote, so that candidates in this next week know who we are. Your friends and family know who we are. That yellow, pink, and purple start showing up more on social media as the other party colors try to push their brand and agenda. So our colors show up, that our billboards get louder. We'll have an anthem video that summarizes our campaign very shortly and tries to provide some momentum as we close out the election. But our point here is that we are actually increasing the volume. We're not going to level it down. We're increasing that volume. Secondly is voice. The way we increase volume, quite simply, is through your voice. What do I mean by that? Well, 2 things. Number one, one of the biggest things you could do for us outside of pledging to vote housing, which I know many of you have already done. And by the way, if you go to votehousing.ca/highlights, you will see the aforementioned party platform analysis that I was mentioning and the survey results from the parties. But you'll also see how to vote housing with a list of things, and I'll walk you through that in a second. But your voice in 2 ways is extremely critical. Number one, to reach out to those that you know. Like I said, that's the fundamental element of campaigning. I'm not asking you to go knock on doors of strangers. No, don't even worry about that at this moment. If you got friends, family, neighbors, let's make your orbit that small. Let me make this easy for you. And if you can use your voice to say, here's what that little mini lawn sign, if you've got a supporter kit on your lawn, explain what that means to them. Go online to our website, download a 1-page PDF brochure, pass it on to friends and family. Explain what vote housing is to them. Do that with your candidates, perhaps. Do that with your friends on social media. Put up a twibbon or a little banner on your social media platform and say, this is what vote housing is. You using your voice, I cannot emphasize how powerful that is going to be over the course of the next 7 days. The second way to use your voice, if you haven't already, or if you know folks in your network, whether you work at an organization, whether you're an individual that have not pledged to vote housing, or that haven't sent a letter to their candidates saying that this is what they're doing, we would love for that action to happen. Let me spend a few seconds on why that letter strategy is so important. An election is the period in time where candidates, right? So every single person running now is a candidate. No one is elected just yet. So there's no parliament. It's been dissolved. Even the folks that know that they're guaranteed to get in some ways, they're in a riding that isn't close, they're going to be the next whatever. This is the time they pay attention. For this particular 36-day window is the narrow window that everyone, the power imbalance is the other way. Rather than us trying to reach out to our politicians, they want to hear from us, right? It's a weird time where for 4 years or 2 years of a minority, it's really hard to access politicians. We have to do a lot of work to advocate and get in front of them. The role is inverse now. They care more about your vote and what you're going to do, more so than the blockades that often exist to access them. So our opportunity is taking advantage of that, moment. So the fact is, even if you hit send on that letter and it takes you 30 seconds, the fact is it matters now more than ever before, because they care what you have to say. If a mail comes into them and saying that you're voting housing, they will read that email because they want to know. And especially what we're having happen right now on our campaign, where it's not just one person in every riding, it's dozens of people in every single riding in this country are sending emails to their candidates, right? That's where that 50,000 comes from. You sure may understand that they're paying attention. What ends up happening is that they'll lodge that in their mind, and some of them will get elected. They will be MPs. And what happens for us when they get elected after September 20th? We're a household commodity. They've heard of us. They've seen that letter. They've heard of us, which is why we are continuing that activity in this week. We're not shutting it down. We're peaking it. We're pushing on it because it's so, so critical. And the final thing I'll mention is vote, right? Of course. We're about showcasing that we can turn up the volume, we can use our voice, but we also will get out to vote. So you will see from us over the course of the next 7 days, several activities that encourage you and ask you to go vote. We've already been doing it during the last week of advance vote. The mail-in deadline comes on the 14th. You'll see us talking about that. And then on election day, we apologize in advance, but we'll annoy you a bit just to make sure you have gotten out and voted. This is fundamental. This is critical to what we do. It's not just raising up the volume and using our voice. Yes, that is super important for us, but it's also ensuring that the act of voting is part and parcel of what we're up to. Tim, I was going to maybe pause here to have you jump in just to see if I've missed anything or I've kind of run by anything way too quickly before I kind of move on to my final couple of slides here.
No, I'd just say, it's after the election and when parliaments resume, the Canadian Alliance, Co-op Housing Federation, Lived Experience Leadership Network, CHRA, we all go and meet and often together with elected officials and those in government. And where this becomes, where the numbers become critical is that they know that behind me and my colleagues, when we go to see them, there's 250,000 co-op members. There are thousands of people in the housing system. There are people who are or have experienced homelessness. And there's over, 36% of Canadians have been touched by homelessness. In some way, either they've experienced it themselves or they know somebody who has. And that is the process of, when that creates political influence, right? If we move votes, we move public opinion, we move people, then they have to hear us. And Zane talked about creating power. This isn't about creating power for the Alliance or CHRA or Co-op Housing Federation. This is about making sure that people who are experiencing housing need, who are experiencing homelessness, who are at risk of both, have a voice, right, in Parliament. And that voice changes policy, right? That voice gets billions of dollars into housing, gets billions of dollars into housing, into ending homelessness, gets the policy changes we all need. So the numbers of letters, the numbers of people who join as a signal of their support is super, super critical to influence, which is essential for us to do our jobs. Like as Zane will tell you, in political life, I'll put it another way. homelessness happened because they could get away with it, right? There was no penalty, there was no punishment, there was no consequence.
There was no one
Because,
speaking up against it
yeah,
in a concerted, collective,
right,
activist way, right?
because, you know, on the flip side of, you know, having enough pressure and enough influence to do the right thing, there's also, I think, a risk for any party in any government to doing the wrong thing and taking us back down this path. And so what we're doing as Vote Housing is building on the success of Toronto Disaster Relief Committee and others, is building this powerful national movement who is intervening in this election, will continue to be a presence after this election. And I think you're going to see us turn this army onto provincial campaigns and eventually perhaps even municipal campaigns. And so all three levels of government feel like they have to end homelessness and address housing needs, or else.
Yeah, and I'll just jump on a few points Tim mentioned there that I think are critical, right? The first one is around credit. You know, this is not about taking credit. This is about Vote Housing is a shorthand for the need. Vote Housing is a shorthand for the size of the coalition, which is why we, you know, the sponsor organizations, Tim, if you'll let me say this, you know, it's not about them. It's not about upfront and center. It's about the need. It's about the cause. It's about the problem. And it's about the coalition of folks that we have. And when we talk about numbers, you know, one thing I often think about is the numbers that not just the thousands of people that have joined this campaign, that have taken the actions, but who you're speaking for. Tim mentioned one critical part of that, right? Which is the literally millions of people that we have highlighted that are worried about paying their rent. This month, they were worried about it in September. Guess what? October is the same. The nearly 5 million people around this country. The 36% of this country that has, translates to millions of people that are impacted by homelessness directly or indirectly. Often I think of ourselves as a movement speaking for those folks that may not be able to either have voice themselves, feel that empowerment themselves, or have had the opportunity to say, our goal is to obviously bring as many of those voices, growing this movement, making it more accessible as possible. But I always think about that track of folks, the millions, quite literally, that we speak for. And then as I kind of think about it from another perspective, the millions of folks that actually support this movement. That's what's really exciting about it as well. Before we started this campaign, just a week before, we ran a poll, right? Just before the election period, I should say, with Nanos Research, a extremely reputable research firm in this country. And what they said is that 70% of people feel like ending homelessness is urgent. 80+% want to build affordable housing. So when we do an action, when we send a letter, when we pledge, when we ask a friend or family member to get involved, when you've done the same, it's with the utmost confidence that I could say you are speaking for millions of people in both ways. Those that may not have voice, but those that are not part of our campaign just yet, but support what we're doing. And that's a really exciting triangulation we have in front of us, that when we speak to decision makers, candidates, political parties, government, ministers, this platform as it goes forward, the majority is on our side. You know, we've got a massive movement that we speak on behalf of. So tactically, how are we going to do this? I'm an expert at bearing the lead. Here we go. Here's what we're going to do. I mentioned this earlier. The 7 days are important. So we're going to help you with the 7 days. Every day, this campaign, for the rest of the campaign, we'll send you an activity to do. It'll be small. It'll be easy. It'll be bite-sized. But one thing is the same. It's going to be impactful. We're going to ask you to do something impactful. Send this particular letter. Download this. Post this. It might seem cosmetic, it might seem small. Here's the thing, if we do it as a practice, as an activity for the 7 days, we have created so much more impact as then the billboards go out, then the video comes out, then the advertising continues. We end on that high watermark that we need to and want to this election with this final 7-day sprint. So point number one, we're gonna send you a list of things, one every single day as we go forward in this campaign. Point number two, you see a list here: send, read, reach, show, activate, vote. That list is copied directly from our votehousing.ca/highlights, which shows you today what you can do. And look at this list. Have you sent a letter yet? Have you read our platform highlights and
Oh, I think Zane might have frozen on us.
And do that right away. Can you add something on social media, a photo frame or something online to be able to help with that? We also have this concept of activate. Can you download that one-page brochure in a very simple activity? Download that brochure. It's one page, pen 3 copies. 1 copy for your neighbor on your left, 1 copy for the neighbor on your right, and 1 additional copy that you can add, drop off to the candidate that you've decided you're voting for. Print a couple of extra copies and take them to the additional candidates that you may not be voting for this election. We're going to send you stuff like this every single day so that you are able to take part, take advantage. And frankly, as I said earlier, our strategy this week is everyone becomes a campaigner. If you've already done all this, thank you. We really, really appreciate everything you've done. Can you bring someone else into the fold, right? Can you add other folks into the mix? And what I'll finish off with is just a very quick 101 about what got us here and our core campaign philosophy. Everything I've asked you to do, everything Tim has talked about, this power building, it's for a very simple cause. And I use this slide in every presentation, and it's really useful in this one, which is, this is one of my favorite quotes on people power and power building from the 1930s and FDR, American president. I agree with you. I want to do it. Now make me do it. I agree with you. I want to do it. Now make me do it. If you've heard me speak before, if you've heard Tim speak before, we use this often because what this is all about is saying we are finding ourselves with, I agree with you. Every major party in this election has a housing platform. I want to do it. They've shown, they've put out the political will. Is it perfect for every party? No, of course not. Nothing's perfect. But they've shown that they agree with us. Point 1, check. Do they want to do it? They've highlighted. We've made this election about housing in many ways. How many times on the news have you seen panels with Tim or our colleagues and Jeff and so many people talking about housing? This election in many ways is about housing. So they want to do it. This is where we come in. Now make me do it. That is us. The make me do it is us part. Because here's the thing. Putting out desire, putting out the commitments is one thing. And it's a huge thing. Let's not undermine that at all. Like, we want to celebrate what you've helped us do. It is upon us to get the third part of that statement signed, sealed, and delivered. We are the make me do it crowd. And the way you make me do it is by numbers, the numbers we've been talking about. It's by the growth of our coalition. It's by the brand. It's by the fact that Vote Housing is a shorthand for a group of folks that are engaged, that are active, that speak for something that is now at the top of the heap on issue prioritization in this country. And so when Roosevelt made that quote in the 1930s, he was talking to a group of folks that he fundamentally, strongly agreed with, but he needed them to create the army, to create the presence, to create the coalition, to create the numbers, to create the heat and the light and the brand presence to make them do it. And I always want to ensure we revisit why we're here. All the videos, the social media posts, the billboards, the platform analysis, these webinars, all of it is in service to ensuring that we are the make me do it crowd, that we are the crowd that any political party in this election and whomever forms government thereon after has to go through. And so I want to make sure we remember that. And so the last thing I will leave you with is, if you feel inspired, if you want to do a bit more, here's one of the simplest activities you can do over the course of the next couple of days. And I'm telling you this because it's not too late. Who from the top of your head can you reach out to right now? If you've signed up, you've joined, who in your family, write down 3 names. Your closest friends, write down 3 names. Community groups, folks you know, write down 3 names. People that are colleagues, 3 names. People you see regularly, 3 names. People you talk to online, 3 names. If you just do this right now, in addition to doing whatever we send this week of printing out this, sending this, doing these small activities, doing this, reaching out to these folks and engaging with them directly and asking 2 simple things. Number 1, can I count on you to join me in Pledge to Vote Housing, and will you sign up on the website? By just getting them to do that, we increase our numbers, because what then ends up happening is when we go out and you sign up a friend or family member, second thing we'll do is ensure that they know that we want them to send a letter. And then all of a sudden, you've helped us not just bring someone, but help someone reach out to their candidates, which we know, as I've explained earlier, this is the time they're paying attention. Now, if they do the same and bring someone else in, and if you add that to the 3 by 3 by 3, it's just a math game. We're growing power, we're building presence, we're ending up strong, we're hitting at the highest volume with the most amount of voices as we vote heading into election day. So if you feel empowered, if you feel inspired, if you feel like this movement is something you want to be a part of in the next 7 days as we end strong on this particular iteration of Vote Housing, here's what I'll say. There's still time. We could still use your enthusiasm. We could still use your energy. We will send you actions on a daily basis. But if you want to reach out and expand that reach, this is the simplest, easiest thing you could do. Find your friends, find your family members, tell them why you're doing this. Your why is so incredibly powerful. And as you do that, we expand our growth, we expand our movement, we expand our reach, and we end up with the high watermark of Vote Housing being a shorthand, a brand, a presence for not just every political party, but for whomever forms government to know that these folks ran a campaign, they've got tens of thousands of people behind them. When we act on anything related to housing, homelessness, housing precarity, these are the folks we need to talk to. These are the people that will make us do it. So with that, I just wanted to open it up to any questions and discussions, and maybe Tim, to you, to see if I've missed anything from my end, as I do get quite enthusiastic about our campaign and about the movement that we have. If there's anything I've kind of missed from a tactical or details perspective there on in, maybe if you want to add to.
For sure. Well, first of all, I give everybody a chance to put a question in the Q&A if you have one, or comment or requests into the chat. I noticed a few folks chiming in there. You know, it's interesting when you look at this election and you look at the housing platforms, and then we've got, you know, a comparison of the platforms on our website. You start to see reflections of some of the advocacy that has gone before Vote Housing. You see, for example, an Indigenous housing strategy embraced by all of the major political parties, but there's a lot of emphasis on home ownership. And why is that? There's an emphasis on homeowners because homeowners vote. There's an emphasis on homeowners because that's a large segment of the Canadian population. We are in a campaign now. That campaign ends in 7 days. We're going to have a new government. Vote Housing, I think it's safe to say, is going to stick around. We want to make sure that in this parliament, ending homelessness, investing in affordable rental housing and co-ops is prioritized, that the Indigenous housing strategy is completed, that rent supports are available. But we get to the next provincial election, coming soon to Ontario, coming soon to Alberta, I think coming soon to Quebec as well. We want to make sure that not just home ownership and the housing system overall, but, you know, affordable, deeply affordable or social housing, co-ops, and ending homelessness are on the agenda, and they're equal to or bigger priority than everything else in the housing system. But again, that comes down to numbers and our ability to convince politicians that this movement will help them get elected or unelected. Right. Couple of questions have come in, and I'll give everyone a chance if they want to throw in a couple of other questions. One person is asking that they watched the English leaders debate and doesn't recall if housing was among the issues discussed. Question: is this deliberately avoided? And if so, what could the reason be? Now Zane is our pundit extraordinaire. You see, I think of Trent McClure on Simpsons when I think of teasing Zane about his punditry, but maybe Zane, you can answer that question. I'm not sure. I think I heard social housing addressed at one point.
I did too. Yeah, I mean, my short summation is I heard social housing be addressed in that conversation brought up by one of the parties. Mm-hmm. Housing overall, despite the fact of how much heat and light and attention every party's put to it, was not a big part of that debate, and neither was the broader construct of affordability that housing has been falling into. I think some of that is a function of perhaps the format of the debate and how much time was given to some extremely important issues, housing being some of them, one of them, I should say. And there's many complaints that most issues did not have much time to be discussed. I would not read too much into that debate as being an importance of the party's commitments to the particular cause. Our focus has been on the platforms, has been on our debate in terms of what they say, how they say it, because those are verbal and written commitments to what they're saying that they want to do. And that's for us, which is, perhaps one of the, to roundabout way, say why we held a national housing debate on this topic, knowing that it needed to be examined and explored with the right definitions, the right tone, tenor, and breadth of a conversation. So I would not read too much into that. I was also kind of disappointed that it, amongst other issues, didn't get more time, but this is why we had our own debate and why we spent considerable amount of our campaign team's time on analyzing the platforms, because those are robust in the sense that they have commitments that line up and that you're able to compare and see where the parties are. And I think it's fair to say that most of them have made commitments on this issue in a pretty big way.
Yeah. Darlene is asking, it says, one of the policies in the Vote Housing platform is rental assistance, which is a tried and tested way to help low-income households offset the cost of rent because of unemployment uncertainties during the pandemic. This is not the case if you're Indigenous. I know so from lived experience. I'd like to know if anyone has thought of introducing a renter protection law. This is the first time in history that the rest of the general population is in the same situation as Indigenous people. Turning up the volume on behalf of her people, she says. So that's a great question. And if a renter protection law, not specifically. However, one of the key themes of one of the key platform elements is the right to housing, and making sure that there is a muscular implementation of the right to housing. And the right to housing, if fully implemented, should have the same effect on protecting renters from discrimination, and creates a process in a roundabout way for renters to seek redress where their right to housing isn't lived up to. It's not perfect. A lot of these renter protection laws or rent controls and things like that are in provincial jurisdiction, so we're looking for ways where that can be implemented, certainly at a federal level. But a renter protection law or rent controls of some sort could be something we consider if we're looking further down the road at provincial campaigns. Nicole raises a really good question. People will ask what party to vote for to vote housing, and some are better than others. So I'll answer it this way. One is I've got opinions on the answer to this question. But I can't, and we can't, and we won't as a campaign, because we have to remain nonpartisan. But what we've done is provide you with what we think are our platform is effectively the bare minimum we think is necessary. And then we've presented kind of responses to surveys, and the party platform is broken down by those categories in our 6-point plan. The question I would ask yourself is, which party has the best chance or has the best plan or the best chance or both of implementing those measures that have the best chance of preventing and ending homelessness, or have the best chance of addressing Canada's housing crisis? So who has the best platform, and who do you believe will be best at implementing a platform that'll have an impact, right? And there's the one thing I would say is that there are no parties with a perfect platform. And I can tell you from long experience, there are no perfect policies. So not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, which are the platforms that are best able, in your opinion, to end homelessness and address housing needs? And that's the way I think about how I come to that question. Vernon says, and I think Vernon was actually the person who put those signs out in Nova Scotia, so thank you, Vernon. I have not seen a lot on support for nonprofit organizations, especially in rural areas. That is a very good point, and I don't know I think there may be some other campaigns working on just the nonprofit sector, but within a federal commitment for us to end homelessness and an expansion of the Reaching Home program, for example, we would assume, or we would expect, that there would be more support there for people living in rural and remote communities that we know are just not currently served either by CMHC housing programs or by the federal Reaching Home program. And we still have time for a couple more questions, so just let everybody put one in there. Hard questions for Zane, easy questions for me, just so we're clear on how this is supposed to go. Dave is asking, does the Vote Housing recognize tiny homes as part of the solution to the housing crisis? I don't see why not. I mean, I think we would be, depends, I think from my perspective, you know, the Canadian Alliance on Homelessness and ending homelessness, as long as the housing is affordable, safe, appropriate, and people will choose it, right? Safe and decent. The form doesn't really matter to me, right? I think if it's, you know, can be apartments, can be townhouses, can be, you know, tiny homes, small homes, doesn't really matter. I think that if it's, is it affordable? Is it deeply affordable? Can people match it in their on their wage, especially those living on income support? So that's where I would put the line. In which city, Anne is asking, which cities are the Vote Housing billboards and any TV, radio advertising this week? The Vote Housing platform, the Vote Housing billboards are in, at least 15 cities.
Yeah, I can get a more specific list if you give me a second, and I'll just run that down for folks.
But in terms of TV, radio advertising, unfortunately, we don't have that kind of budget. We're sticking with the good old online type advertising, which has actually been quite effective and allows us to target to people that are already interested in the issue. Elaine is asking, I can't get the Vote Housing logo to post on Facebook. What should I do? There you go. Hard question for Zane.
Maybe if you send me a direct message there, Elaine, I can help you exactly with what you're struggling with. You should be able to message me directly. I'll stay even after the call if you want to do that, or I'll just put my email here in the chat, and you can send me a quick note and I can give you a hand.
Awesome. Oh, and here's the list from Zane in the chat of places where these ads are, billboards are running. Thank you to our friends at Upfront Media as well for that contribution. We could only get billboards because they were donated to us. Janet is asking, our Black and African community, including refugee, victim of abuse, women fleeing abuse, and new immigrants, don't get the same access to housing. What can we do about it? We really need to advocate for them as well. As a lived experience, I went through it and still struggling with the same issues. Janet, you are absolutely right. This is an issue of, I mean, frankly, this is an issue of overall housing supply in the urban centers, and we see these pressures. So they would certainly be, folks would certainly be included, but understand also the barriers of racism and that some of the folks in these communities would face. So absolutely agree that we need to advocate for them as well. Okay. If there aren't any questions, I will stop here and let's see if Zane has anything he'd like to add. Any last questions, comments?
No, I'll just add one thing. And I'll keep reiterating it. It's not too late. This is a hugely important week. We're going to try our best to try to get the conversation and keep it active and as alive and as high of a volume as we can. Your voice and frankly your vote thereon in will really, really help us get there as we end this campaign strong and look forward to keeping the movement very much alive and active and growing thereon in. So thank you for all your efforts and all your time.
Yes, and I'll just echo that, and we'll end by just saying thank you all very much. Not only is it not too late, this is actually the perfect time. This is exactly
Perfect.
the perfect time for us to engage, for all of us to be heard, to get the letters out, get your friends in, get your families in, get the signs out on your lawns, get the pamphlets and flyers to your candidates for members of parliament. Now is the time when they want and need to hear from you. So with that, I'll just say thank you all very much. We are going to post this recording of this webinar up on the Vote Housing site, and we'll flip an email to everyone who registered for this as well, just to let them know that when the recording is up, in case they've missed it or others would like to share it. So thank you all very, very much. Don't forget to go and vote. We'll see you all on the other side of the campaign. And again, thank you very, very much for everything you've done.
Thanks, everyone.